Thank you. So as Sonia said, I'm Tiffany Finck-Haynes. I'm a campaigner at Friends of the Earth. For those of you who aren't familiar with Friends of the Earth, we are the largest federation of grassroots environmental organizations in the world, fighting to defend the environment and champion a healthy and just world. I lead a campaign called our Bee Action Campaign, which is working to protect pollinators because they are declining at alarming rates around the world. Does anybody know how many pollinators we have around the world? Any guesses? Okay, well, we have over 200,000 different types of pollinator species. So I think a lot of us, when we think of pollinators, we think of bees or butterflies, but bats, hummingbirds, moths, even monkeys are all different types of pollinators. So I'm going to focus mostly on bees and butterflies today, but just think about that, how many different types of species there are around the world that are pollinators. So honeybees in particular give us 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat. So probably a lot of what you ate for breakfast this morning came to you due to bee pollination. So they are responsible, especially for this time of the year, for all of the yummy fruits and vegetables that end up on our plates. And they contribute over $15 billion to our US economy, over $217 billion to our world economy. So they're really, really important. They're essential to our food system. So Whole Foods did this great image. They took out all of the produce in their supermarket that comes to us from bee pollination. So just take a look. It's pretty alarming to see if we didn't have bees, what our supermarket shelves would look like and what our options would be. They'd be pretty bleak. So bees are dying at alarming rates. In the past 10 years, they've been dying at about an average of 40% every year. So that's on average. So some beekeepers are losing as many as 100% of their hives. In Maryland, which is really close, beekeepers lost over 60% of their bees last year. So that's huge, and it's really hard for beekeepers to continue to withstand those losses. The other species that are dying at a really alarming rate are monarch butterflies. In the past 20 years, they've declined by almost 90%. And there was a recent study that came out saying that they are at basically quasi-extinction. We'd need a 5-fold increase for them to be able to return to safe levels. So we have not only the bees and the butterflies that are dying, but in general, there's almost 40% of invertebrate species that are on the brink of extinction. So this is really alarming. It's something we need to be really concerned about for our food supply. The other type of bee species, not just the managed honeybees that are declining at alarming rates, are native bees. So it's easy for us to get a sense of what's happening to our managed bees because we have beekeepers that are taking care of them. So they can easily record what's happening. But for native bees, they're solitary. So they're really burrowing, creating their own individual habitats. So we don't have as many ways to record what's happening to them. In the US, there's over 4,000 types of just native bee species alone. And one of those native bee species are the rusty-patched bumblebee, and they've declined by almost 87 to 95% in recent years. So again, really alarming numbers that we're seeing. So there's a lot of different reasons for why bees are declining. There's climate change, habitat, pest diseases, and pesticides. So all of these factors are working together to contribute to our declining bee and butterfly species. But at Friends of the Earth, one thing we like to focus on are pesticides, because they're one thing within that big factor of equation that we feel we can do something about right now. So there's one type of pesticides in particular that have a number of studies, over hundreds of thousands of studies have found contribute to bee decline, and those are called neonicotinoids, neonics for short. So if you're going to your local garden center, you wouldn't look for neonicotinoids on the bottle. What you'd look for is imidacloprid, clothianidin, these names. And neonics are different from other pesticides because they're acutely toxic to bees. So they can either kill them outright or they can weaken their immune system over time. It's basically like delayed mortality. So if you look at sort of this graphic over here, what you can see is that the way neonics work is that they get applied into the soil and then they move up through the plant into the leaves and the stems and then are expressed out into the plant in the pollen and nectar. So the bees are exposed to them over time. And as I said, it's like delayed mortality. So when the bees are exposed to them, either they're going to die, or it makes it hard for them to navigate or get back to their hives. So neonics are neurotoxic. They're related to nicotine. So it's sort of like a cigarette smoker. It's kind of crazy. There's been a few studies that show that bees are actually addicted to plants treated with neonics, just like a cigarette smoker is addicted to their cigarettes and they want to keep smoking. So kind of crazy to think about like a bee smoking, wanting to keep going back to their plants. But their effects in the soil are that they can last for a long time, months to years. On the extreme range, it's 19 years. On average, it's more 3 months to 3 years. So they can last for a long time in your backyards. They also are found in our water. So the U.S. Geological Survey has done several studies in recent years finding that in samples of our water in the Midwest and then around the U.S., they're showing up in over 80% of our water samples. So they're lasting for a long time because they're water soluble. So you might wonder, where are these found? Does this really impact me? So they're found in our own backyards. We did this study several years ago called Gardeners Beware. We tested garden plants from 18 cities across the US and Canada and found that over half of the bee-friendly plants we tested contain neonics. So that means you might want to go into your local garden center, get some bee-friendly plants to create a safe haven for bees in your backyard, and not realizing it, actually be planting a plant that might be bad for bees. So that's one place. They're in our backyards. They're often in bottles like this Bayer Rose Care treatment. They're also used as a seed treatment. So a lot of seeds, if you're using organic seeds or uncoated, or good organic seeds that are good for the environment, they're going to be brown. But seeds that are coated in pesticides are usually colorful. So blue, green, pink, and a lot of our big grain crops, soy, corn, wheat, and canola, the vast majority of them are coated with neonics and other pesticides. And aside from just the grain crops, over 140 crops are coated with this pesticide. So as you can see, they're widely used. They were introduced in the 90s, and their use has rapidly expanded. So just within the last about 20 years, you can see from these maps how much we're using these insecticides. So this is an infographic sort of showing their impact on the environment. So there was this task force, a big task force called the Task Force on Systemic Insecticides. It's a global body made up of 30 independent scientists from around the world. They reviewed over 1,100 studies and found that neonics are not just harming bees, they're harming basically every other species that we depend on for food production. So just one of those coated seeds is enough to kill a songbird. And they really recommended that we take immediate action to help restrict their use to protect our food supply. The other pesticide that is contributing to pollinator decline is glyphosate. So glyphosate has been found to be a leading contributor to monarch decline. Right along the monarch migration route through the Midwest, there's been a lot of Roundup-ready GMO crops that have been engineered to withstand large amounts of Roundup. And so those are wiping out milkweed, which is the sole source that monarchs rely on for food. So as you can see, the same thing with glyphosate is happening that we saw with the neonics. Their increase has increased a lot within recent years. Where you're going to see glyphosate is in Roundup. I think a lot of us sort of recognize that product when you go into your local hardware store, garden store, and so that contains glyphosate. So around the world, there's been a lot of action done to restrict the use of these pesticides. Just last year, the World Health Organization put glyphosate on a list of possible carcinogens. The European Union placed a temporary moratorium on the most widely used neonics. And then last year in Ontario, Canada, they're working to phase out the use of coated soy and corn seeds that contain neonics. And in the US, we're seeing some shifts. So there's been a move by retailers, garden retailers, specifically Lowe's, Home Depot, and Whole Foods, to restrict the use of these pesticides. So they're working to eliminate plants pre-treated with these pesticides and products that contain the neonics. And there's been some action from states and universities and local cities. So The state of Maryland recently became the first state in the country to pass a law that would ban the use of consumer products that contain neonics. Connecticut followed soon after that. And there's been several universities. So Emory University, I think it was Southern Oregon University, and a few others have all passed university policies to restrict the use of these pesticides on their campus. The Fish and Wildlife Service moved to phase out the use of neonics and coated seeds on all of their wildlife lands by 2016. So there's a big movement. After the World Health Organization decided to list glyphosate as a known carcinogen, California followed. However, the Environmental Protection Agency has not followed the lead of the European Union by taking action to restrict the use of these pesticides. So they're continuing to review glyphosate. They haven't followed the World Health Organization as listing it as a known carcinogen, and they have yet to take action to restrict the use of neonicotinoids on all current products on the market. So, as a lot of our previous speakers have said, there's a real need to shift the way that we are farming in this country in order to better protect species such as birds and butterflies and bees, which are critical to our food system. So, Oxford University did a big meta-study which found organic agriculture has the ability to protect 50% more pollinator species. So, we really need to reimagine and re-incentivize the way that we are doing agriculture, making sure that we are allowing farmers to farm in a way that's good for the environment, moving away from pesticides because we know that it is better for our soil, it's better for our water, and it's better for our people and the planet. So there's a lot that you can do to help take action. It's kind of scary when you start to think about the rapid decline of pollinators, but there's a lot that each of us can do in our own backyards and beyond to help take action. So one of the things you can do is be really vocal. It's important to inform your friends, your family, your community about what's happening. So you can write a blog, you can write an op-ed, a letter to the editor, spread the word, let everyone else know about this problem and what they can do to help solve it. The other thing you can do is make your city or school pollinator safe. So Friends of the Earth released this toolkit called Green the Green, and it walks you through all of the steps you need to take in order to pass a policy at your school or in your community to make sure that your community is planting pollinator-friendly plants that are native, drought-tolerant, good for the environment, and also pesticide-free so that you're creating good, healthy forage for pollinators. And make sure that you eliminate pesticides, starting with the neonics or glyphosate and moving towards a totally organic management for your lands. So if you go to our website, you can find this toolkit. It's pretty easy. It walks you through all the steps about how to pass a policy. There's already some students here from University of Maryland who are doing that on their campus. You guys should talk if you're interested and learn from their experience. The other thing you can do is be an advocate. So it's really important that you contact your local legislators, your state legislators, and your members of Congress to urge them to take action. So it's important to support policies such as the Saving America's Pollinators Act, which would follow in the lead of the European Union by placing a moratorium on the most widely used neonics, to support policies like we heard about earlier that are happening in Maryland and other states to transition our farming system, and also to contact the EPA to urge them to take action and follow in the lead of the European Union and other countries by restricting the use of glyphosate and neonicotinoids. So that's all I've got. I think I'll turn it back over so we can watch the movie and then hopefully have some time for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can come find me. And this is our website. That's my email and my phone number. And thank you so much.